my third career at Google, was academic. And so even though most people, their mothers would be very proud if they worked at Google, my mother would be much more proud that I'm back here in an academic setting where she always wanted me. Before I begin, just by show of hands, how many of you have volunteered on a campaign of some sort? I want to see who I'm talking to. Okay, that's not enough. We'll work on that for the rest of the fall. I have what I really think to be the best job in America. And I don't have any slides. I want this to be conversational. Feel free to heckle. We're going to save plenty of time for questions at the end. But I have what I think is the best job in America. Because before, for about 12 years, when I worked on campaigns, I was always 100% zeroed in on one campaign. So for instance, the Delaware race we mentioned, this is a race where I was working for a state treasurer who upset a lieutenant governor. And we pulled that upset even though the sitting Democratic governor had endorsed against us in the primary. The state party had endorsed against us in the primary. And 37 out of 39 city and town committees had endorsed against us in the primary. And the way we won, other than having a sharp message and a great candidate, was mobilizing the youth vote. And it's very easy, everyone kind of says they've turned an election that way one time. But I really feel that we did. We won by less than 1%. And we had an actual student organizer in every single high school in the entire state of Delaware organizing their peers. We had early vote programs, we had educational programs, we had college programs, we had young Democratic programs. Top to bottom, we were reaching out, engaging people, and getting them to vote for the first time. It was exciting, and I want you guys to all to try that someday. But to talk about what I do now, that's a deep dive. I knew everything you could possibly know about Delaware politics for one brief time in life. But now at Google, I work with, or Google works with almost every campaign, party, and issue group in the country on their advertising, working on their media plans. And what we're seeing right now is a real sea change. So an example I like to give all the time is go back to this race in Delaware. In 1980, my father managed in South Bend, Indiana, a congressional race for a congressman named John Bradamus. One of the first elections, certainly in Indiana history, but even nationally, at the congressional level that spent $2 million. It was an enormous race. It was kind of a big sea change, like 2008 was, politically, 1994 was, 1980 was. And that, Thanksgiving, we sat down and we were comparing notes. We're just, kind of nerding it up at family time over some turkey, talking about our media plans. And what he did in 1980 and what I did in 2008 were almost identical, right? We put most of our money on television. We put, about 10% of it in direct mail. He did a little bit more direct mail. I did a little bit cable. But we had basically the same media mix. And what we saw with the same media mix was that this is more than a generation with no real change in how campaigns behave. In the last 4 years, or actually really 3 years since then, we're starting to see a fundamental shift on how campaigns communicate. And they're doing it by taking some of their advertising online and getting more of their communications done for free online. So the classic example is the Obama campaign, kind of known for owning the internet, people say. They spent millions of dollars in online advertising for the first time. They mobilized 13 million people into their voter lists, and they brought more new voters to an election than any election in history. But that's what I want to do is that kind of sets the stage. I work with everyone, and what I want the question answered to be is, what questions do you have about this year's presidential race? What do you want to know what people are doing online? So start thinking about that now while I tell my story. So let me break and make an awkward transition. Has anyone heard of the phrase, the zero moment of truth? I want to see if our marketing is working. Okay, good. I didn't think so. If any, it's a made-up phrase. So there's a senior executive at Google that wrote a book this spring. This book is called The Zero Moment of Truth. And I'm going to explain to you what that means in one kind of very short snippet here. Who wants to be, is anyone in college, or is this all high school crowd still? Okay, by show of audience, who wants to be a marketing major? Is everyone going to be a political science major? Okay, you in the orange. This is important to you, so you have to pay attention. For the last 40 years, there's been a prevailing mental model. I'm going to look right at you while I give this part. A prevailing mental model of marketing, right? So Procter & Gamble and all these kind of the biggest advertisers in the world have come up with this model. And this model is that the first moment of truth when you're going to buy something, like some frozen peas or some toothpaste, is when you're walking down the cart in the grocery store, walking down the aisle with your cart in the grocery store, and you stop at this big wall of toothpaste, right? And there's Crest, there's AIM, there's a billion different ones. And the moment of truth, they've always said, is you grab one and you put it in your cart, right? You could have grabbed any of them, you grabbed one of them. And there's lots of things that cause you to make that decision, right? For instance, there's all the stimulus you received before, like the television advertising. There's, maybe you read a review, maybe your mom told you to go get Crest when you ran to the store. But either way, for this long time, there's been what we call this first moment of truth when you put something in your cart. Then there's a second moment of truth. That's when you go home and you use the toothpaste and it tastes good or it tastes bad, or it makes your teeth clean or it doesn't. If you're buying laundry detergent, it's if you make your white's whiter and your bright's brighter, or it doesn't, right? So you have the first moment of truth when you put it in your cart, and you have the second moment of truth, which is when you use it. So this is my brief digression into the private sector. It's not really my area of expertise. The senior executive of Google has written a book claiming that this has been turned on its head, that the way we've been looking at marketing for the last 40 years has kind of fundamentally changed. And why has it changed? Because now you do something different, right? It used to be you have the stimulus, you see the TV ad, and then you put it in your cart. Those are the two key moments. Now something happens in between. And what is that? Anyone? Any guesses? I work for Google, so let me give the obvious answer. People search for information online. It's no longer the case that you're driven directly from reading a news article to making a purchase. So imagine when you guys were kids, right? You would see, you'd hear this phrase in commercials. You say, look for it in your grocer's freezer. Now what do you see at the end of every ad? You say, look at our page on Facebook, right? Follow us on Twitter, even for products, even for kind of normal things. And so we had this idea that there's now more stuff happening prior to the first moment of truth. So what's first minus 1, 0? They call it the zero moment of truth. So he's undergone this year-long study and did all this kind of consumer research to start finding what's the changing pattern of preference. How do people make up their mind in a new way? And what he's seeing is that there's all these what we call zero moment activities. What are zero moment activities? These are the activities driven by the consumer where they're searching out more information, where they're trying to get more, I'm hitting my microphone, trying to get more information, trying to share more information. So imagine, again, searching online for something is one. Now, someone's yawning now. I've got to make this more fun. I'm gonna pick on people this whole talk. Don't think I'm above it. So what are zero moment activities? If you look at your friend's Facebook page and they said they liked this product or that movie, that's a zero moment activity, right? That's you getting information from your friends or doing a little research. If you sign up for Groupon or Living Social and you're looking for coupons or better deals, that's what we call a zero moment activity. Those are things we do that we weren't doing 10 or 15 years ago. Now, there are some zero moment activities that are not new, right? When you just talk to your family about what they want, having a discussion, or in the political case, sitting at the barber shop, getting a haircut, hearing what your barber has to say about politics, right? That's something that's gone on for hundreds of years. But what we're seeing is that where this used to be a very small set of activities, something that would happen occasionally, possibly only over a random conversation over the water cooler, now are self-directed. You can go choose to do this research anytime you want. You can look deeply into it. So again, that's my awkward transition. 2 minutes on why you should study this if you are a marketing major. Enjoy. The guy's name is Jim Lisinski, zeromotivetruth.com. You can look it up. So that's kind of making waves in the marketing world, in the non-political world. And what we did is we conducted some research to try and see is, does this, what's clearly happening in the consumer world, right? So for toothpaste and laundry detergent and mustard, we have all this data. It's clearly showing it's changing. People are now doing all this research prior to the first moment of truth. Is this also true in politics, right? So let's kind of just talk through this. This is the first time I've released some of this data, so I hope you're enjoying it. So let's talk through it. What would be the first moment of truth in politics? The first moment of truth in politics, easy cut, is when you go vote, right? It's a much more cut and dried day. It's election day, you're standing there, or if you get a mail ballot ahead of time, but you walk into the poll and you have to pull a lever. That's a moment of truth. That's when you have to make a decision, right? In this traditional model, what are the stimulus we're used to seeing in politics, right? It's what's dominated our industry for the last, since really 1960 almost. Television advertising, or cut television news, or direct mail at your home, or a debate that you see. Anything that is a stimulus to you, anything in politics that forces you to think about something, that's a stimulus moment. Now ask yourselves, the way you behave right now, is that the whole story? Are you seeing ads and voting and have nothing happening in between? Or did we miss part of the story for a whole generation? I think the answer in our hypothesis was, no, that's not the whole story. All these zero-moment activities we're talking about for shopping are also true for voting, right? So what would a zero-moment activity for voting be? Like I said, I mentioned a few. Going to the barber shop, talking to a friend, asking your parents who they vote for, sharing on Facebook, reading the articles that someone sends to you on Facebook, watching the funny videos from YouTube that your friends post on their social pages. All these things are activities that are now in your control that allow you to get more information about who you want to vote for, about who you should vote for, and what the implications of that race will be. A lot of people ask, why does Google even have an elections team? And I probably should have put this up front. We overinvest in the space, hugely in terms of headcount because we think democracy is important. Just a very simple thing, democracy is important, but it requires an informed citizenry. And what we're seeing is all these tools are now allowing more people to get more information about the decisions they make, and that's exciting. So let me try and put some numbers to this, if I can. Excuse me. In the private sector, what we're seeing is that we asked, here's the best way to describe it. We asked everyone a holistic question. How many different things do you take into account when you're about to buy your toothpaste, or about to buy a car, or about to choose a candidate? And for different verticals, say the auto or the consumer packaged goods or kind of different areas, we got different numbers of answers. And it turned out that politics was the highest. People of all ages said they were likely to use 14 different sources to make a decision. And a lot of these are the zero-moment sources. And more people actually cited as the most important driver some of these zero-moment activities, some of these activities that's self-directed to them, where they're researching, that are social, that are engaging. So even more so than these private sector examples, voters have come back to say that they want this self-directed moment. But it's not just that everyone says they do it or recall doing it. They cite them as the most influential. So we asked kind of two series of questions. We asked you first, what did you do before you voted? And we got this list of all these sources. Then we made everyone stop and re-rank them. Okay, out of these sources, all these things you mentioned, like I saw the TV ad, I got the direct mail piece, my mom yelled at me to tell me to do it. All these various things people cited as reasons, all the ones that were the most influential, the things they liked the most, the ones that they said that really, when push came to shove, caused me to vote, were the zero-moment activities, the things they could control, where they could filter the information themselves, where they could engage it, right? So the story is, I think it's a great story for democracy. People have been hungering for more information, and now campaigns need to be there to allow them to get it. And I'm going to kind of close this with some interesting stories about how this works with advertising. But that's the big picture. This is the zero moment of truth for politics. Now, anytime you do data, does anyone ever read a poll? Does anyone, like in an AP class, you got to do some sampling, or do that freshman year? Okay, we have a few here. Everyone, is a sidebar, take an advanced statistics class somewhere in your first year in college. You'll use it in every discipline, in economics and math and logic. Just do it, get it out of the way. You want to learn some stats. So for I forgot where you guys, yeah, there you guys are. For the statisticians in the bunch, what high school did you go to? Congratulations. I don't know what that means. Awesome. So usually when a politician conducts a poll, you get what we call, first are the baseline results. The baseline results of a poll are kind of everyone who answered the survey, or the top level results. All right. So, for instance, every week you'll see the CNN Time poll or the Gallup poll, and they give you the top line results, like only 41% of America approves of the president. You then get what we call crosstabs, or what the data underneath it. And what crosstabs are for any given demographic you ask a question about. So let's say if you ask a question, how old are you? People who answer in a certain age range, you can look at the results just for that segment, right? So that's a crosstab when you look at the results just for a certain demographic or breakout group. With the zero moment data, so we ask all these people, what causes you to vote? And they listed out 55 different drivers. And on average, across all age groups, people cited 14 different things that made a difference in their deciding to vote. And out of those 14, the ones that were most impactful, the most important ones, are the things that were a little bit self-directed, the research. We made a crosstab of young voters, people 18 to 34. What do you think we found? The young people who are, and this is the important phrase, digital natives, and I'm going to talk about that at the end too, as well. were significantly more likely to identify zero-moment activities. They were significantly more likely to mention a high number of sources. So of the whole population, people on average said 14 different things drove me to vote. For the 18 to 34-year-olds, it was 21 different sources, right? So this is actually now a related fact, not out of zero-moment data, but we started seeing this big change as the internet grows with media consumption in general. So what we see is that people are less aligned to one news source. So my parents' generation, they grew up either watching NBC or ABC. They liked to be their one anchor. They always talked about, they got all their news from one source. They read one newspaper. Now in the digital generation, kind of over the last 40 years, everyone is going to more news sources. But the people your age, the people who grew up online, the people who are used to it, you're more likely to go to more different websites per day, even the same amount of time. You're more likely to read more different news sources every day. You're less likely to have allegiance to any one medium, like television or a particular newspaper. And you're more likely to get your political news or cite, I got my most pertinent political news from more different sources. All right, so you have this whole generation of what we call digital natives. So I'm the cusp generation. I'm Generation X. You guys are millennials, according to the census folks. As part of Generation X, I didn't email as a kid, right? I had a computer as a kid, but we didn't have the web. And so a lot of these things I learned in college. I learned after college. I learned when I started working at Google even more. I didn't know how to turn a computer on when they hired me. People who grew up doing this, so it's natural to them, so they've always been used to receiving information online, they actually behave differently. So there's a whole realm of different categories where you're more likely to be more comfortable with the platform, to look more deeply into the platform, to use the platform in new ways, to experiment with new sites, to watch more video online. You're just more comfortable doing things online. And so, kind of take these two trends and put them together. If you're a generation that's more likely to take these zero-moment activities seriously and consider them the big driver for political action, and you're more likely to be online and to engage more different platforms online and to read things more online and to watch more videos online, what does that mean? Anyone? It's a very obvious conclusion, which is if you want to mobilize your generation, if you want to communicate to them, if you want to give them the drivers they will accept, you need to give them what they're asking for, which is online engagement. Make sense? So let me give a concrete example, and then I will turn over to Adam in just a moment. This is a little bit counterintuitive, but so out of the hands, people who volunteered in a campaign, who's been a part of a phone bank? Okay, there's a few. Everyone should phone bank at some point because it's like a painful experience that helps you grow. Studies show that if you call people and say, hey, go vote, or if you have an automated call reminding like, hi, this is the Congressman, go vote, or any kind of very quick message, the uplift in people voting is very small. If you call people and you have a conversation with them, say, hi, John, this is your neighbor, Bill. Have you thought about when you're going to vote tomorrow? And then they say whatever they say. They say, oh, probably lunchtime. Great, you should plan on voting at lunchtime. Let me know if you need a ride. Having a brief interchange, even just a few sentences, is a much bigger uplift on being likely to vote, right? So this is not new. This is not a digital point. This is just a kind of a fact about mobilization. What online allows you to do, both with kind of social tools like Facebook, Twitter, videos where you can have replies like YouTube, or just the advertising in general that allows you to go to a website and get more information on your own time. It allows you to have more of that engagement, more back and forth, more interplay. And the more back and forth and interplay you have, the more engaged the voter is, the more likely you're going to take it to the next step. So that's my big point. That's the data I wanted to give. I'll now turn this over to Adam. But I want to take as many questions as possible.
Hi. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about what we do. So we're not such a big company as Andrew, so you've probably never heard of us. Basically, we are a voter information site. Just to correct it, we had 1.2 million visitors, not 1.2 million people who voters visit us for voter information. Basically, it's a website where you can go in and type in your address, get a complete sample ballot, including all of those down ballot races that nobody pays attention to, school boards, city councils, stuff like that. And candidates can interact with the voters by posting their profiles on the site. My background is with a dating site. I was one of the co-founders of a site called JDate. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. So you basically have to think of it as a dating site for candidates. And so they can connect with voters, and organizations can do the same. And taking up on what Andrew said, where we get our traffic from is really this great mass of people that are out there on the internet actively looking for information. Before the last few years, campaigns had to really go out and find people to talk to, and a lot of money was spent in campaigning, doing voter targeting and doing all sorts of analysis of voter files and media spending on where to reach likely voters, and that you had to reach a certain target audience. Most campaigns don't have enough money to reach every single voter in their area. When you're talking about big districts like a governor's race or something like that, it's mind-boggling. And so they actually have to, what's called narrowing their universes. So they only want to talk to people who are likely to vote, and they can see on the voter file that someone's voted in like 3 of the last 4 elections or 3 of the last 4 primary elections. So they can kind of get that down to a small budget. But that's all changed now, because now there's actually ways that people are talking back to the campaigns using the internet through search and through their behavior on the internet. And now one of the things, just to start off from where Andrew was, he asked everybody in the audience, how many of you have volunteered on a political campaign? And only a few did. Hopefully that'll increase. And what you'll find is when you first work on a campaign, is you'll be involved with youth issues because you're young, and they'll automatically assume that you know everything about the internet, and they'll automatically assume that that's who their social media or internet person, it doesn't matter whether it's someone running for city council or someone running for governor, that their social media person and digital person should be someone young, because that's who they're talking to. And that's a bit of a mistaken assumption, because the title of this was the digital generation, and one of my points usually is what exactly is the digital generation? When I grew up, there wasn't, it was long before Al Gore invented the internet, didn't have email, I didn't have my first job, I didn't have a computer on my desk. And now you'll find out, this is really depressing, when you get out into the work world, mostly what you do is sit at a desk and stare at a computer screen for about 8 hours a day, which is where people do most of their surfing. And so I got to kind of crane to look and see which poll is up there. Pew is a big research foundation, and they have done, they tend to do it yearly now, a study of politics on the internet and where people are getting their news and how people are behaving. And this first slide is just, and I apologize, I copied the numbers twice. You'll see that the categories just repeat. It's just, I just copied that twice. Shows where people are getting campaign news from. And television remains fairly constant in the high 60s, but you could see that, and they can get it they could have had multiple, it adds up to more than 100%, so that people could have answered more than one source. So what you see is that radio is also kind of very little, but the internet number has grown significantly from between 2002 and 2010. Can I get the next slide? But this is the most important thing, I think, which is that when you look at the total number of people, so that top line would be what Andrew called the baseline. The top number of people is the number of Americans who say that they get some of their campaign news from the internet, and that is now a majority of people, 54%. Okay, and what's interesting about this is that you will constantly hear that campaigns use the internet and use digital media and use social media to communicate with and mobilize younger voters. And they're missing a big picture, because if you look at that age breakdown, you'll see the only age group where voters, of likely voters, that are not using the internet, a majority of them, is 65 and older. Every other group up to 65 years old, the majority of them are getting campaign news from the internet. So when you are first out there, volunteering or working on a campaign, what you really have to do is take that campaign manager by the lapels and say, look, we're not just talking. Sorry, we're not just talking to take them by the mic. No, we're not just talking to young people out there. In some ways, the digital generation is now everybody. Everybody is doing this search. Everybody is on the internet. I'm in meetings with political parties, and I say, when's the last time you looked for the movie times on the newspaper? You look for it online. You Google stuff online. I had an investor call me, and he said, do you know who I am? Did you Google me? And I said, of course I Google you. Everybody Googles everybody. So the point is this is the way that most people are behaving. And it's not just an age thing. You guys are really, most comfortable with it and using it through the most medium, through phones, through whatever, but the fact of the matter is that everybody is out there, and you're kind of leading this charge, but at the same time most comfortable with it, and maybe more, a little bit clearer on the terminology or on how to do it more efficiently. But the fact is that everybody is really a part of the digital generation. And then there's some more breakdowns on there as far as, obviously, as you go higher incomes, you're going to get more people. And that's also the interesting thing about the higher income is if you look at the highest income, which is more of these people are getting their news online. And the fact is that actually points towards an older skew, because obviously people are when they're older, they're making more money than when they're younger. Can I get the next slide? And this just shows the breakdown of where people are getting, and that's the news sources on the internet, and CNN is at the top, then Yahoo, and then you can go down. And one very interesting thing is that candidates on websites is only like 2%. So people are really looking for third-party kind of news and third-party validation. That's kind of important. I get the next. Okay. There was another study, and I'm going to, I don't want to bore you with studies here, but none of you had seen too many polls, so now you've seen a lot. That just came out the other day, so I just kind of clipped the relevant page, which is also about how campaigns have to really adjust their mentality. Again, Andrew said, and it's 100% true because you talk to these people and you can see it. They're doing things today the same way that they were doing them in 1960. And there's reasons for that. One of the reasons is the vast amount of money that has come into political campaigns. It's like a $5-6 billion a year industry at this point, spending money on political advertising. And the fact is that consultants and these guys make a lot of money on television ads. And if you actually show them a way that they could spend a little less money, they're not really that quite interested. And the thing is that they're very, very focused on television. Television is where, and that last minute, television campaign blitz on the last weekend before Election Day. So a bunch of digital media companies went out and did a study on both sides, Republican and Democrat. So it's totally neutral on that point. And to see how many people watched live television during the last week. And they found, and I might be slightly wrong on the numbers because I can't see it, but it was about 31% nationally did not, and this is 18 to 44, and I kind of have a debate with that because I think that a 44-year-old is a lot different than an 18-year-old, but nevertheless, they're saying between 18 and 44, only 31% of people watch television. And if you think of how you guys watch television, or even how your parents watch television, people watch on demand. They DVR it. They skip through the commercials. And so 31%. It's like an unbelievable statistic, although it makes a lot of sense. Have not watched live television once in the last week, and they actually broke out Florida and Ohio, because Florida and Ohio are like the big swing states in 2012. That's why we're going to get a lot of attention down here. In Florida, it was actually slightly lower than the average. It was about 28%, but still a big number. In Ohio, which is kind of your typical Midwestern state, which you would think would be even lower. It's actually much higher, 38%. And what that means to campaigns is that they really have to start focusing on where they're going to find these voters, because it means in Ohio, a swing state, 38% of the people are not going to watch those last-minute campaign ads that the presidential campaigns, let alone everybody else, are going to spend millions of dollars on that last weekend of the campaign, and they're going to miss 38% of the voters because they ain't watching. So it's really changed how people are campaigning. So just to wrap it up, I think that and let you guys have some questions. I think that combining with what Andrew said, I think that what campaigning to the digital generation means is that the internet is a method where people can tell you what they're looking for. And to copy his phrase, or his boss's phrase, the zero moment of truth, I think, has become very important, because campaigns used to operate in a way, and I always use this analogy, and it's particularly appropriate to the guys from Cocoa Beach there, is that in the old days, if you had a guy that made surfboards, right, they would say, well, who's your typical surfboard customer? Well, probably a man between 18 and 25 was going to be here, and so that you would have a limited marketing budget, and you would target to advertising medium where you were going to get men between 18 and 25, okay? And what has really changed in a fundamental way, and I think the private sector has gotten it, but the public sector has not gotten it, or the political sector has not gotten it, is that now if a 55-year-old grandmother in Kansas puts the word surfboard into Google, you could be pretty sure she's looking to buy a surfboard. And do you not want to advertise to this person? Okay, it doesn't matter who they are. A lot of what campaigns are doing, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be doing that, because obviously it's just one part of an entire strategy. When I was in law school, you were told you build a case of brick in the wall at a time. You don't build the whole wall. But they're focusing on they have limited budgets, and they have to reach their target audience. But now they also have this tool where people are raising their hands, virtually in the air and saying, guess what? I'm voting. I'm here. I'm searching voting. I'm searching what's my sample ballot. I'm searching to find my polling place. I'm searching to find, who's running for the school board. I'm searching this stuff. I'm telling you I'm interested, okay? And please talk to me. Please spend some time talking to me. And that's, I think, what campaigning in the digital generation is about.
I have a question for you guys. How many of you actually watch commercials at all? You do? Like real just all the time commercials? Okay. All right. Well, so you don't DVR it and race through the commercials except for the Super Bowl. Okay. Well, I find it interesting that television is a big part of campaigning, because I frankly don't watch television very much, and when I do, I never watch commercials at all. So to me, I'd much rather get on the internet or watch a debate and do my own research. How about you all? Do you get your information from the internet mostly? Yeah? Go ahead.
So let me tell, maybe just to draw a question out of you, just a really brief story. Because the other idea that maybe we didn't emphasize enough is what online allows you to do is to make your advertising relevant, right? So it's not just that you have an ad or a video, it's that it's relevant to you in some way. So one very cool story from the last cycle was Michelle Bachmann. She was running for re-election for Congress, and she was running against a woman who'd been on the record, her name was Terrell Clark, for supporting higher taxes on fried foods. So this is right in line with what the First Lady Michelle Obama does, get healthy, healthy kids. It's not controversial at all. But what the Bachmann campaign did that I thought was just genius was that they decided to run an ad campaign. They made a video kind of making fun of her for wanting to raise taxes on fried foods. And they ran those ads targeted only to mobile phones and only at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds and some surrounding area during the Minnesota State Fair. So I've never been to the Florida State Fair, but I've been to state fairs all throughout the Midwest. And these are odes to fried food. They have fried Snickers, fried Oreos. They have fried butter. I don't even know what that means. But if you think about it, you take an issue that most of the time is not very salient or not very controversial. And they found a way to make it relevant to where people were living their lives, right? So it's no longer, as you were saying, it's no longer just about targeting people. It's about targeting people and making your message relevant to them with what they're doing. That's what's new.
The fake ads by Stephen Colbert endorsing Rick Perry, like, what do you think that did? Like, I'm not really sure what to think about that. Like,
this is a great question. I think it did two things. So to repeat, if everyone didn't hear it, he asked, Stephen Colbert set up a super PAC. So there's a court case called Citizens United. Citizens United created, has anyone here given to the super PAC and been on TV? So Citizens United created a new class, this court case, kind of a new class of political entity called super PACs. These super PACs are kind of dedicated to, they're PACs that are solely focused on advertising and independent expenditures. And they endorsed Rick Perry with a very funny ad where they misspelled his name and called it A for Perry, A for Iowa. I think it did two things. One, it's drawing more scrutiny onto this whole area of campaign finance. And that's really what he's up to. He's kind of mocking the system. The idea that there's a new class of PAC called super PACs, he's mocking it over and over again. And I think by going to the FEC, he's inviting all of us to take a second look at this. But it also, I think, was a little bit bad for Rick Perry. And I'm kind of here as an online expert, not as a political expert, but my 2 cents on the pure politics of it was his big entry into the race kind of jumped him up to front-runner status faster than it should have. Having all these kind of secondary conversations, kind of the mocking, the fun, the side conversations, the thing that make us chat, be about him also elevated him. So when you saw what a lot of people thought was not a great debate performance last week at the Google Fox News debate, the stakes had been raised for him. There's a general, like 1 second on politics. Any West Wing fans here? There's a whole episode about this. Good, watch them all. There's something called the expectations game, right? You always want to be doing the best you can, but you also want to kind of temper expectations. So my goal for the speech this morning was to get up there and not have my fly down or use a bad word by accident. And so I exceeded expectations by that measure. Right? Having all this buzz about Perry made him raise the expectations, raise the stakes for him, and he hasn't been able to carry through on it.
There was the study you showed about watching the television before the campaign. But do you know if that was any different than what was normally watched in a week? Did it change because it was the week before a campaign?
I'm sorry if you misunderstood. It was just any week. It wasn't the week before a campaign. They did a survey about any week. So what I'm saying is that any week also equals the week before a campaign. So the answer to your question is that the study was for the question was, did they watch television in the last week? It wasn't tied to a campaign, but the implications for the people reading the survey now is that will hold true in the week before November, whatever it is, November 6th, 2012.
Yes, I was just wondering how effective you think Google's technique of aiming advertisement at certain demographics depending on the website they choose, how effective do you think that would be in terms of advertising for campaigns?
So that's another great question. And so I feel like part of both of our talks, we're downplaying the need to target demographics, right? Say, what we want to do is talk to the people who are raising their hand, the people who are engaging us. But you also have to bear in mind that sometimes you know from your polling, sometimes you know from experience, that you want to give different messages to different groups. I might want to talk about teacher pay with soccer moms, and I might want to talk about lower taxes with the NASCAR dads. So being able to communicate to people in a medium that has back and forth, that's engaging, that allows people to go to your website and get more information is important, and that's kind of the bigger value proposition we're talking about. But there's still lots of reasons to segment your message, to target different folks. And there's also the economics of it. Even with online, small campaigns can't afford to show ads to everyone all the time. So you do have to, for lack of a better phrase, pick your poison a little bit when you're making a budget. And let me give my 1 second public awareness announcement. To all the future campaign managers in the audience, hopefully there are a lot of you. That was my first job and I loved it. Your budget is always your chief strategic document. You have to be in control of how much money you're going to have, when you're going to spend it, where you're going to put it. Being a campaign manager, I always say, is like being a quarterback in a West Coast offense at football, right? You have to move the ball around, get it to all your different players, and make sure everyone is kind of spreading it out the right way.
So on behalf of the Lou Frey Institute, I'd like to thank Andrew Roos from Google and Adam Kravitz from eVoter Inc. for being here this morning.